All right, hello everyone. Tommy Simon. Good to see you again or talk to you again. I'm live from Atlanta today. With me we have Steve Moritz. I believe some of y'all saw Steve um, in his previous seminar that he did in December. But let me reintroduce him. So Steve Moritz and I go back 25 years. We worked at Capgemini together, CGNY, Sagetti, and then through the years have worked together. And then the first person that, when I came to Team International, that I asked to come and join me was Steve. He's one of the best consultants that I've had the pleasure to work with over the last 25 years. And so he is going to drive this week's presentation. Um, I think we're going to get into some subjects that really excite me around intelligence and automation and automating the automations. And so, and with him, we will have Val. Val, as many of you know, joins me in many of these webinars, and she is going to do a demo of a solution that we did for a client here in Atlanta, actually, Wellstar. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Steve and let you drive. And I will say I apologize for us being a couple of minutes late today, guys. There was a couple little bit technology glitches on my side as I'm traveling, so do apologize for that. But we'll make up the time. So Steve, go ahead.
Very good. Hey, thank you, Tommy. Hoping everybody can hear me just fine. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. So as Tommy said, we'll try to work quickly through the topic. The agenda is really quite simple as we talk about this notion of 5 ways to make RPA, to make your bots more intelligent. We're going to use the terminology of intelligent automation and hyperautomation actually synonymously, and we will attempt to be very pragmatic as we explain exactly kind of what the difference is between basic bots and this concept of hyperautomation. Additionally, as we talk about the specific features or attributes that make all of this come together for greater business value, we'll kind of ground our messaging in 2 ways. One is, as Tommy mentioned, we're going to actually kind of show you what IA really looks like in a healthcare setting, right? So kind of move from the theory down to the practice. And 2 is we've explained the different pieces of technology that elevate RPA to hyperautomation. We'll do that through actually using real life case studies. So again, we move, talk more about the practicality and less about the theory. So you've already been introduced. Tommy, I really hate when you do the introduction because it violates a key principle, which is if you can just set people's expectations of me low enough, I will never disappoint. So anyway, we'll proceed anyway. And I want to thank Valentina in advance, who's going to do a really good job kind of showing this intelligent automation solution that we've already put into place in a health system. So as we explain this and give you kind of the hyperautomation 101, we'll talk additionally about, well, how are the benefits kind of accruing? How do they arise as you kind of transition from basic automation to stuff that's a lot sexier? And then it's important too that we spend a little bit of time knowing that in this audience, you all might be coming at this with a little bit of a different point in your maturation, and we'll talk about that and why it's important to kind of moving in the right direction and moving quickly. We'll define those specific pieces of technology and talk about the actual 5 ways that this all comes together, and we'll do that through case studies. Of course, within there, we have the demo, and then we'll mention, a team and Tommy's team have a really fantastic way kind of to take clients who they may be struggling, or they may actually have a kind of a decent amount of automation in place, but what we typically find is that the pipeline, the backlog across the business landscape far eclipses any kind of capacity. So we'll talk about how the quick strike can quickly help our clients kind of understand how can they kind of move forward, right? How can they identify the right use cases, perhaps expand their capacity, or even maybe fix a troublesome implementation of bots. As I move kind of into this whole notion of, what's the hype about hyperautomation? The reality is, I think you probably heard much about RPA, and we're not going to kind of replicate that content. But when we talk about what really kind of puts the hype around automation, a couple points as we look at this is actually, the Webster's definition, right, of hyper. If you go down to the bottom, it's really about including more dimensions. And as you'll see in the examples, the case studies in the demo, a simple bot might look at a particular transaction, evaluate it for compliance or some expected value, and then maybe do an approval, and that fires off an ACH payment. And that's all good. But as we move into hyper automation, we start taking the sophistication of that process in multiple dimensions, meaning it may be accessing a database. Then it's going out and checking data against a website or a public, a trusted public site. It's then maybe adding data to a data warehouse and running an analytics. And that's kind of the second point. The fourth point, it's also about the inclusion of data. And we'll speak a lot more about this because, in general, the notion of hyperautomation is really based on intelligence, right? So intelligent automation equals hyperautomation. We'll talk about how that gets achieved, what the results are, and again, give you some examples to kind of open your mind to this concept. So if you forget every slide that we present today, this is the one that I hope you don't forget, right? We know that the growth in this hyperautomation space is around 65% per year in spending. That's services, that's software, cloud consumption, and it's expected that the industry of delivering these services is going to be north of $2.5 billion by next year. And I actually kind of like the way kind of Gartner looks at this. At a general level, RPA is about automating a task, and it may be a subset of a much bigger set of processes. So I mentioned exactly about paying against an invoice. RPA taken to the hype level or hyperautomation is really about improving an entire suite of processes that are critical to an organization. So it could be scheduling in a healthcare system and taking schedules and then doing a much better job with staffing and, let's say, operating room allocation and supply management. It can be, again, taking a simple transaction of receiving documentation on shipments and building a much bigger chain to actually improve the entire supply and logistics function. So let me, again, quickly work around the wheel. I think, again, you all kind of understand the basic promise and pragmatism around RPA, automating specific tasks, replicating often keystrokes that I'd say, sometimes it's clerical, but, we're not talking about C-level people executing those processes. So as we go around this wheel and we do it, let's go clockwise. No, let's be radical. Let's go counterclockwise, right? So we'll go over to NLP, natural language processing. So team is building bots that are able to read language. It may be a text in, say, a customer service window on a web app. It could be reading emails, and it could be including handling actually language. And being able to, number one, understand exactly what that text says, pull out and parse specific words, do the same with human speech, and then know what to do with that information, right? So it then commits that into a digital format, and like any kind of a 0 and 1 combination, people can then start processing that information. So it breaks down that barrier. And as you can imagine, it now expands the scope of relevance way beyond just handling a simple payable. The next, as we continue our trip around the clock here, is artificial intelligence and machine learning. Again, you're now both through the execution of transactions and through the additional data that you might be able to glean from other sources, you're now doing two things as it relates to data. You're creating insights that perhaps could feed other parts of the organization, and you're actually also using data to improve the quality and execution of the bot. And so when we show you the example later, and you're going to see how a bot was able to read an image and then determine what that image was over time through data, that process and the accuracy and that all got better. The number of exceptions went down. And last point on AI and ML, right? So it could be a bot that's very focused on addressing complex transactions across the supply chain, and it's allowing for the reallocation of clerical people that maybe did invoice matching, were actually kind of looking up a lot of the exceptions when, say, an invoice didn't match a purchase order. It's taking that information and not only making the process better, but perhaps creating data sets and insights that high-paid people can understand, that then helps them develop. And maybe it's a better vendor strategy. Maybe over time you're aggregating purchasing, and it's creating the opportunity in that aggregated purchasing for changing some of your supply chain decisions, basically lowering your supply chain costs. OCR is fairly easy to describe, optical character recognition. Again, you'll see an example of that. The concept being, of course, the bot has the ability, working either with another imaging solution or the bot platform itself has the capability to do OCR, and therefore it's able to both understand what the document is and parse that into digits and images, and then allow for further execution of process. So I want to do a quick analogy here, and if you look at this content, you're probably scratching your head and you're like, why is this information here, right? So the analogy between workers and bots is that, and I don't mean to present this information in any kind of pejorative way at all, suggesting that a person with a doctorate or a person who's a lawyer is smarter than someone who has less than high school. As my father-in-law, God rest his soul, was a high school dropout, and he ended up running a multi-billion-dollar company, and one of the smartest guys I ever met. So anyway, that was kind of a quick side story, but regardless, the point I'm trying to make here is the smarter you are by virtue of your education. The more you learn, the more you earn. And this is a perfect translation to why the smarter the bot, the more value it brings into the organization. And we'll talk about that value proposition in a bit. But the point being, as these bots are getting smarter, as you're creating through intelligent automation, your greater sophistication of your automation, you're now able to reallocate relatively high-paid people. And we'll go through some case studies where people that were kind of focused on a lot of the transactional nature of a business were unencumbered to then go focus more on strategy, on top line, on sales, and on marketing. So the more you learn, the more you earn, and that is perfectly applicable in the world of bots as well. So, oops, I overshot my landing. Let me go back a little bit here. And so, here's the point, kind of emphasizing that a little bit, but I want to kind of explain what are the concepts, right? So as you look at this and you go from good to great, right? Fantastic book if you've not read it, but I think everybody's read it. You start out with process automation. So, there's great products out there like K2 that they've been out there a long time, way before all these RPA vendors came on the scene, that handled basic, simple process automation. RPA tools allowed you to kind of go up the curve a little bit, more sophistication in terms of the processes that you can handle, and definitely better platforms in terms of how you actually model your process and then kind of create and design, build your bots, and then manage it. And then, as we've defined, you put those 4 pieces together, you have hyperautomation. So as you go across, again, the spectrum left to right, it's great that you're taking cost out of your processes and you're improving accuracy. But now you start getting better and smarter, right? Now you're actually reducing the process exceptions. So you'll see the example later about a bot that was reading healthcare images. And through the improved information that was gleaned from execution, we were able to reduce our exceptions, identify more accurately particular documents, and expand the scope. And then again, as you move all the way up to hyperautomation, now you're really not just reallocating people, but the bots themselves are creating insightful information that you're then feeding to those people that have kind of now been reallocated from kind of some of the menial tasks. So we've worked with a lot of different companies at Team, and Tommy's kind of created a lot of flexible models in how we work with clients, from you pay us and we build your bot, to don't pay us anything and we'll amortize the cost of that bot over time in a 2-3 year contract. That's inclusive of the build cost as well as all your platform costs. So it's kind of set it and forget it. We've got models with clients that have said, well, you guys are, kind of promising to save us millions. Put your money where your mouth is. And we're very comfortable in those settings where it's relatively quantitative. We have a quantitative ability to kind of identify existing costs and map out future costs based on hyperautomation. And we do what's called a gain share. And so if we think a project is going to result in $15 million saving over 3-4 years, we'll work together to figure out how much does our client keep and how much do we keep. And the benefit, of course, is if it's not realized and the client has no risk. And the benefit for us, of course, is that we are damn sure to deliver against expectations. But the point is that our clients kind of fall into these 3 categories in terms of where they are. And I've already mentioned, again, the business value goes up, but we have immersed to support our clients regardless of where they are. For those that are just kind of in the, we'll call it the low levels of IA, meaning they're really just focused on the operational efficiencies, to those that have already started actually using more intelligence, maybe more AI and ML to improve customer experience and employee experience, all the way over for those that are pretty sophisticated. They've begun process mining. They've begun, putting data science into their bots, looking at trends, and what we've been able to do in all of these cases is, not just bring smart people to help our clients improve velocity and the volume of what they build, but Team International has a repository of IP for bots that have been built across a number of different platforms. And what we find is, while every client has kind of unique processes and technology, that catalog is a real time saver. And so we always find it's interesting as we're understanding the optimum use cases for clients across any 3 of these locations, that that repository tends to be a real value add. So as I mentioned, we can work with clients in any of these areas. We find that for anyone who is starting, or whether they're kind of in the struggling area, or they actually are already kind of having a lot of success, what we believe is that there's always the opportunity to move more quickly into an intelligent automation. And again, the more you learn, the more you earn, right? And therefore, the smarter the bot and more able it is to not just take people maybe out of a particular process, but reallocate them, handle more sophisticated transactions, include information and insights to improve the overall performance of the organization. So, this is kind of, again, back to some of the hype. The vendors are fantastic, and we work with virtually all of them. but you're going to get this kind of messaging, that this is going to take out 50% of your costs. You'd be able to get rid of most of your workforce, and kind of you're going to get ROI overnight. We think that, like most things, it's not necessarily binary true false. There's a degree of accuracy, but let us kind of maybe debunk the hype, talk a little bit more about the reality in each of those cases. And this, of course, is applicable to hyperautomation, not just straight up RPA. It does allow you to reallocate knowledge workers. And, RPA is great at perhaps taking out a number of clerical roles, but hyperautomation, in addition to that, really gives you that opportunity. And to make those knowledge workers who are now reallocated smarter, and give them more insightful data by virtue of what's being calculated, aggregated, and created through these intelligent bots. Augments workforces with better intelligence and speed. That's exactly the point. That's that second layer of value that goes above process automation around data insights. What we do find is these projects, simple bot projects, actually do take weeks. And we have done work in 2 and 3 weeks for simple processes. But sometimes as we get more complicated, and as, for example, we're training an imaging capability and we're using artificial intelligence to cycle that data back to the bot, we end up taking months. It can be 2 months. But again, when we're looking at a process save of $5 million a year, many of our clients are comfortable with projects that last 8 weeks, but it's not years. And the last reality is it improves the ROI of your automation investment. These platforms aren't cheap. Many clients have done a lot of work with training their staff, deploying their staff, but we believe the more you introduce these added layers of technology that make RPA turn into intelligent automation, and we can validate this in the use cases, the ROIs increase. Are they going to go up to 50%? I don't necessarily know, not always, but the thing that's also harder to measure is as you have these knowledge workers now doing more important things and being fed information from the bots that make them smarter at their jobs, we definitely contend that the ROI goes up. So I said before, there was a slide I went through. It had 4 pieces of technology. This is, I guess, the other slide that I will say, if you forget all the slides, please remember this one. Because this starts talking about how do you move from RPA, standard, simple RPA, to intelligent automation. So how do you kind of go from the hype of all that to the reality? And, these are 5 specific capabilities, things, and we're going to kind of talk about each in the use case or an example. So integrating activity, making the bot cover many different applications and many different data sources. A bot doesn't care how many applications you tell it to work with. A bot doesn't care how hard it might be to navigate a particular system. If you've had people in your organization, for example, it could be that they're handling underwriting in a mortgage origination business. There's a lot of information that they have to take in. There's often a lot of that that's kind of handled by a preprocessor. But the more the bot can handle some of those functions, and so maybe it's some of the underwriting functions, it's looking up real-time pricing and premium information. The more the bot can think about a larger complex process, and often that involves the disparate applications and data sources, the better. So always kind of be looking to do more. You'll see an example, and we'll talk about a case study about it. It's very important, a lot of this intelligent automation, to understand documents. I've talked about health records. We've got some examples of clients that are getting shipping information from out of their supply chain that include tariffs, as well as freight information. And it comes in a lot of different forms. It comes in a lot of different languages, comes in a lot of different currencies. So you could staff that. Many organizations have a lot of people on board that handle all that. But again, you can understand, is it in peso? Is it a euro? Is it a dollar? You can introduce the intelligence in your bot, thanks to the technology and the capability of teams, to understand those digital images and over time improve that understanding. Now, the third is really simple. The best way I can kind of define that is automate your automation. So you are going to need smart people who know these technologies, be it UiPath, Automation Anywhere, etc. And these platforms are getting better and better, and we work with a number of them as well, like ePiance, that actually let you use automation as you're developing your process models, and then as you're kind of building the business requirements documentation, and then they enable kind of the execution of scripts. So you kind of push the button and you say, I want to generate UiPath scripts, Automation Anywhere scripts. So you're actually bringing automation to the process of automation. And we think that's a really powerful way to improve the speed, the productivity of investments in building out intelligent automation. I've given you a couple examples. We'll continue to emphasize the importance of data and having bots actually be the entity that, of course, is executing transactions. From that, looking at kind of, we'll call it the data exhaust that comes from those transactions and driving insights from that. And as I mentioned before, those insights then not either, because it's not an either or, they can go back to the bot and improve the bot, improve its ability to execute, improve the underwriting skills, improve the loan origination skills, to improve the ability to read medical images. And additionally, that bot can create data that become insights that kind of reflect on the transactions, reflect on the exceptions. And again, that is really powerful for strategic reasons. And then the last that we mentioned is being able to understand natural language processing. And therefore, that, again, greatly expands your envelope of what you can do with your bots. And now you're working with customers. Some customers, actually, this is how they want to work, and some want to call a call center. But for those that are comfortable in this world, and it could be employee transactions internally with HR, it could be customer service inquiries, and many of us probably seen this kind of technology in play. And if you don't like it, you hit the X and you're gone. But many, roughly what we find is that 40, 45%, 50% of customers actually are comfortable with and demand digital transaction support across the entire relationship. And that's where these bots can basically play. So let me take a quick break, and then we will get into a product demonstration and put it into context. As we talked about those 5 pieces, what you're going to see is really reflective of at least 4 of those. I wouldn't say we're really using human speech recognition in this, Titania, but let me turn it over to you, and you can take the mic and take the screen and do the demo. Over to you, Valentina. You're on mute.
Thank you, Stephen. So now, are you able to see my screen?
Yep, looks good.
Oh, okay, thank you very much. Okay, so basically what Stephen was mentioning before, everything falls into this demo, and it's completely true. So what we're gonna see right now, it's an AI functionality that's able to classify documents, right? So there's 3 key pieces or components that we could consider within this AI functionality. One of them being that it's able to collect any range of documents and tell you the type of documents that the file is, right? The file that is being uploaded is. So that's the first one. The second one is that it's also able to extract information from the file, so it leverages OCR. And then with that, it also triggers, or is able to trigger, automated workflows. So that's how an intelligent automation or hyper automation at the end is built. So it's like an AI functionality plus automated workflow of any kind, right? So I'm gonna hit play, and now the first file is being uploaded. As Stephen mentioned, this functionality is being trained to understand healthcare documents at this point, but it could be trained to understand any type of document. So for the first one, the system told us, okay, that the first one was a photo and the second one was a photo as well, with a probability percentage. For this third one, this is a behavioral form, and the system recognizes it as it is, with a extremely high probability percentage. And for this one as well, which is an EKG, it could be trained to understand any type of document of any industry, right? So now that we've collected the type of document that it is, we would like to know also information of the patient, for example, in this case. So we run it through these OCR, right, and extract information as the name, the MRN number, or anything that's contained within the document that's important for the company, right? And that could be done even if it's, of course, a photo, or if it's a PDF form of any kind. So here we're collecting the same kind of data. And then with that, we're triggering the background and an automated workflow that would go to the EHR system, right, to the healthcare system, and would do some automated actions there. Of course, it could be either the ERP system or any system. The RPA would log in as a user and will perform the actions that that are needed within that system. So for this specific scenario, for this specific use case, what the RPA, what we train the RPA to do is just to upload these documents to the right folder structure within the EHR system. So at the end, any automated workflow could be triggered out of this, and that's how we build at the end intelligent automations. So that's the end of the demo. I'm going to turn it back to Stephen. Thank you.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Valentina. Hopefully that kind of brought this to light for many of you. Let me share my desktop back. And, back to kind of the original point about, the intelligent automation and the power of it. In this case, this health system had about 40 people that were assigned to take all of that documentation that Valentina showed you and move that to the proper EMR. And in implementing this intelligent automation, that client was able, and health systems, as everybody certainly can understand, very challenged right now because, unfortunately, of the pandemic. But that was enabling them to not just reallocate those people to much more productive endeavors such as revenue cycle, which is really a critical function for a health system, but also to be able to take the information that was gleaned from the execution of that bot and actually use it to improve clinical care. So it's kind of like buy one, get one free, right? Automate the process. Actually, buy one, get two free. Automate the process. That allows for great savings. 2, move those people from basically a function associated, that's basically a cost, to one that's based on revenue. And 3rd, be able to create data insights from the execution of the bot that helps in other areas of the business, or in strategic areas of the business, in this case around clinical care. So quickly, because I want to make sure that we stay true to the time contract of this kind of concluding in around 60 minutes. We're now going to kind of go through each of these 5 particular technologies, right? So if you look at the title, this is a case study. We're going to talk about simply and quickly a network infrastructure company. And this is an example of kind of the first kind of leg of the table, if you will, although I've never seen a table with 5 legs. But the first is integrate across disparate systems. So in this example, it was a network company, and their challenge was scheduling their people. And as you might expect, that scheduling process involved a whole lot of different systems. And they had a whole lot of people right now, or before we automated this, involved in creating that schedule, updating it, communicating it out to the field. Quite honestly, it was kind of a hot mess, or kind of a dumpster fire. And so what we were able to do is, by having that bot reach out and connect with all these different systems, but then additionally to kind of rationalize, normalize, and basically make some sense out of the chaos, and do that in real time, then basically the scheduling process became automated. It was a better schedule. The communication was handled through the bot. And also think about too, this is a global company, and things happen 24/7 that impact the schedule. So it could be shipments didn't arrive as planned. It'd be customers called in and made changes in terms of the scheduling. It could be that there were transportation issues, and so the bot works 24/7, right? The bot doesn't take a break. Bot doesn't take vacation. So the outcome was a significant reduction in the manual effort to handle scheduling, and improved ability to be out where they needed to be, right person, right place, right time. And that obviously had a positive effect on their service levels. So now we're going to kind of move to kind of the second kind of leg of our 5-leg table, which is understanding digital images. And in this case, we're going to talk, you've already kind of heard one example from Valentina in her showing the team bot, intelligent automation bot that was built. But in this case, it was basically just understanding digital images around invoices. And there were just a lot of them coming in, a lot of different systems. There was an AS400 involved in the processing, green screen, web-based systems. And what we were able to do is to actually, in looking at it at a piece of paper, be able to discern that it was in fact an invoice. Also, it was important to understand what exactly is that invoice for, and of course, pulling out of that additional information about purchase order. And so what we were able to do is, again, not just take people out of that flow, but also straight through processing, improve the delivery of payments to vendors. And so therefore, over time, vendor terms and vendor agreements were enhanced, reflecting kind of a much more responsive process, right? So again, it had a significant financial impact. Now let's move to kind of the whole notion of being able to automate the design and developments, right? So, I mentioned tools, the various vendors are getting better at this, and then there's kind of, I'll call it complementary technology like ePiance. And so in this particular example, we had a bank and it was struggling with a number of their processes. In this particular case, it had to do with loan approvals, loan management, loan servicing, the securitization. So there was a whole cornucopia of processes in this bank, and they had a kind of a non-competitive allocation of people to these processes. So we work with them first to kind of identify not just the use cases that made the most sense for RPA, but also, and additionally, and more valuably, those that were good applications or use cases for intelligent automation. We then work with their IT team, because the execution of this work always has to be a collaboration between business and the technical team, right? What we never want to create is kind of shadow technology that is built as we work with IT, or I'm sorry, as we work with the business, that can't be supported or isn't understood by IT. The way the team executes these engagements is, unless the process is purely an IT process, it could be, regression testing as an example, or production turnover management. We will kind of, if you will, force a collaboration so that we get the right subject matter expertise in the original project, in the requirements, and in the testing, and that the technology leadership, is very much in the fold. We're working with them on their strategy, ensuring whether it's the selection of a platform to execute and design the bots, as well as the kind of technology that we're talking about here that automates the development and allows script generation. We're going to work collaboratively. But in this particular case, because they had so much they wanted to tackle and they really didn't have a whole lot of resource to do it, by putting in place these platforms to kind of automate the automation, right? It just took a lot of time out of working through the backlog, and it reduced the cost or reduced our allocation of resources. But maybe more importantly, this bank was busy. Both the business people and technology folks didn't have a whole lot of time. So we were able to greatly reduce the burden on them as we built, created, and then managed these. And so it took a whole lot of time, 75% out of creating the initial documentation. And then we feel it was roughly about a 50% reduction in time, cost, timeline, et cetera, to get these into place. So now let's kind of talk about identifying patterns in data, right? So again, a retail example where we used, in this case, artificial intelligence. So certainly we've all seen tons of data points over the last year about the growth of e-commerce. And e-commerce was on fire even before the pandemic hit. And what we've seen is, of course, a lot of folks, myself included, I'm sure we've all done this, where we go into a site and kind of shop and we get distracted, we put something in the cart, we're not sure, we abandon. So cart abandonment is a big problem for any e-commerce company. And there are certainly a number of content management or web experience management tools that kind of help track who's on your site, where are they, and they all do a good job tying that back into kind of marketing automation. But what they don't do is they're not good with transactions, right? They're not good with the putting automation in to interact between what's happening on, say, an e-commerce site, with customer relationship management systems. And in this particular case, we were understanding what was happening with carts. The bot was determining reasons for abandonment. The bots were gleaning as much as possible about the customer, those that maybe were registered, or even those that weren't, but they're certainly able to track and collect data from the content management system about a particular user's experience on a website. And it was able to take all that data and begin to kind of understand why carts were being abandoned, what the triggers were, and then from that, create multiple personas and multiple kind of transaction flows, standard flows that would fire off based on the reason. So once the bot knew kind of who had created the cart, the bot was able to begin through AI to understand what might be a likely or probability for abandonment. And then the bot then was able to create communication and do that in an omni-channel way, meaning based on the persona. It may be an email drip campaign back to the potential customer. It could be texting or other formats. Perhaps it would send a notification over to the call center. And as you can imagine, especially as today consumers are moving so much more of their spend from physical locations to e-commerce, this was a powerful use of intelligent automation. And you can see in the outcome how it affected both their e-commerce sites and the reduction in cart abandonment. So let's kind of get into the fifth and the last example. Here we're going to talk about a kind of an IT bot for a large consumer and packaged goods company. And this was an organization that obviously, as you can see by them working through 500,000 tickets a year, is a big company. And again, if you have an IT budget, if you've been a CIO, and I've been one, you can either spend money handling 500,000 tickets annually, which is an important thing to do, to manage those internal customers. But if you can reduce the allocation of cost and people to that, then you can unencumber and reallocate to much more productive endeavors, maybe building new systems, not just handling the complaints that come in on the systems you've already built. And so what we were able to do is to create a series of intelligent automation bots that were able to kind of read the inquiry, to digest natural language, in this case, email and text, and to be able to then parse that, and from that information over time, build scripts for particular remediation, communicate that script back to the customer, the internal customer. And then additionally, again, some of them were slam dunks, like, password reset. And the bot itself would begin to execute the remediation and do some of the activities that the people on the IT help desk used to do. And, look, some companies, candidly, take the results from these intelligent automation projects, and it may underpin a reduction in force. It's very candid, and that's unfortunately the case. We've seen that especially with the pandemic. But pre-pandemic, what we really saw, especially when unemployment was running at the low rates that it was, is that we really saw, like I said, the power of reallocation, the power of taking people who were doing things that weren't that strategic and giving them the chance to do, quite honestly, more interesting work, moving more people from being process workers to knowledge workers, and that was powerful. So I've got a couple of minutes here. I mentioned as a tease in the beginning that Team International runs, and often these quick strikes are a powerful way to help our clients quickly mobilize, and regardless of where they are in their journey. We talked about those that are starting, those that are struggling, and those that actually are kind of screaming and streaming along. This quick strike, you really think about what we do is it lays out a plan, and it says these are some additional use cases. These are some project parameters where intelligent automation can, if you're just beginning, get you started. If you're struggling, it identifies remediation and kind of lets you understand where you can mobilize on future use cases. And even for those, like I said, that are kind of really crunching along with this, we always find opportunities in doing this quick strike to identify, again, maybe we can take over the maintenance of dozens of bots. And in so doing, your team can then be freed, unencumbered from maintaining that. Most of those are what I'd call not intelligent automation. And then we could work with you as we now own the maintenance burden to really start looking at true IA or intelligent automation use cases. So we'd love to talk to you about these, and Tommy and team can certainly get those scheduled. To give it some context, these quick strikes, we tend to try to chunk this up into maybe 2, 3, maximum of a 4-hour workshop, because everybody's busy. And the way it typically works is we'll do a quick education session. It's amazing when we get the right users in the room, how many use cases people kind of bring into the workshop. We then kind of put criteria around them to kind of sequence them as far as what makes the most sense. Then we kind of go away and we figure out team timelines, cost, and budgets. We bring that back to the client kind of maybe a couple days later, and more often than not, they're kind of the next step is we start identifying exactly which of the use cases and how we're going to kind of begin on that work plan. So I think that's the last slide. I don't know if we wanted to open up this up to any questions, Valentina or Tommy. I will take that as a no.
Yeah, yes, Steven, we don't have questions at the moment, so go on.
So do you want to talk about our upcoming webinars?
Yeah, we have very cool webinars coming in January. So we'll be glad to see you guys on these webinars. Just go to our website and register, and you'll get all the details in the email. And looking forward to seeing you there. It will be about automating and optimizing labor scheduling problem with K2. We'll have guys from K2, and the webinar on 28th of January will be like the second part of this big topic. So see you there.
Very good. And here are your contacts. Tommy, you've already heard from. You've heard from me, probably more than you care to. Samir works out of the country of Colombia. It is fantastic. He kind of drives all of our projects, the automation, the architecture, the delivery, and then Valentina, you've heard from today, and she's terrific in terms of being able to speak to kind of that healthcare and imaging solution. And she's the owner of the RPA business. If that's all we've got, I don't know, Valentina or Tommy, if you have anything in conclusion.
No, I'm good. Thank you very much for your webinar. It was fantastic hearing you.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time. Appreciate you giving us 57 minutes of your very valuable day, and we hope to talk to you soon. Have a good one. Bye.
Thank you, Steven. Thank you.
Bye-bye.